Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Lori Drake, and I'm the Building Blocks Community Manager here at Handle. For those unfamiliar with Handle, we handle lien rights, waiver compliance. We also have a payment portal and job research. Today, we're joined by Nicole Hicks. She is the Director of Credit at Elite Roofing Supply. Thanks for joining us today, Nicole.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Okay, so I'm going to start off just giving you guys a little bit of my background. So I have been in construction for 23 years now, 20 of those years being in the credit field. And the last 15 of those years are specifically in the roofing industry. So those of you that don't know the roofing industry, we spend a heavy amount of time managing jobs, lien rights, bond rights, waivers attached to those projects. And a lot more so now in the last couple years, we're actually executing on those liens and bonds just because the environment has become a little bit more difficult. So I'll be speaking mainly to that experience in roofing. And then by no means am I a subject matter expert in this field. So if you guys are, involved in some high stakes projects, I would highly recommend partnering with a construction law attorney to support you in those situations. We have some in every state. It's just a good idea to have somebody who is way more well-versed on the legal side of protecting your lien and bond rights. So, and I've made mistakes in this space, so I don't think any of us can say that we haven't made mistakes, but there's a huge learning curve involved in securing and tracking lien rights. And so it took me many, many years to really feel like I had a good understanding of that space. So if you're not really well versed in it yet, give yourself time. It just takes time. So this is kind of what we'll be going over today. I did want to spend some time talking about getting your job information, gathering that data, and feel free to ask questions here too, because I know everybody's systems and processes are very different. It's a very important piece of, ensuring that you do have that you're tracking rights properly, you're verifying addresses. You don't want to miss deadlines, and you don't want to miss rights just because you keyed in an address incorrectly. So that's very, very critical. And then what do you do once you have your job information? What do you do with that information? How do you track your rights currently? And then I'll share a little bit about what we do here at Elite. And then we'll cover a little bit of best practices. I'm going to unmute myself, Lori. So best practices, some things to consider when you are filing liens or sending out pre-liens, just in general. And then the results, how making sure that you are secured impacts your company's results in your accounts receivable. Okay, so as I said, your inputs are, I would probably say the most important piece of this. So it's really critical where you're getting that information from. Here at Elite, we do use job sheets to gather our information on large projects. We do keep that information internal. We try to, at least. We try not to burden our customers with providing more information. We know they already, are heavily involved in other aspects of the project. And so sometimes you send one more form over to a customer and it's just going to sit on a desk for a week or more and require you to do a bunch of following up. So just our own internal process is to request that information in-house from sales reps or branch, other branch staff that are dealing with that project. And again, the old adage, garbage in equals garbage out is so true for this. So if you're plugging in, like I said, an invalid address, or you're getting, wrong information from your branch, the chances are you're not going to have, you're not going to send the notice to the right place, and you're not going to have lien rights at the end of the day when you do need to execute. Um, so just look at that as far as your own company's processes go. How are you gathering your information? I know some places will pull from invoices, and that's fine. Just the tracking piece is another consideration there. So if you're looking at invoices for addresses, how are you tracking your shipping dates on that project? That was one of the key things, that we considered when we set up our process to require job sheets and to set up separate job accounts in our system is, first and last ship dates are super critical to that. So it's harder to do when you're just looking at invoices that are mixed in, intermingled with other addresses on a customer's account. And then on those job sheets, there are certain pieces of information that are critical and that, are required for us. Some of it is just niceties, but make sure you're looking at what you absolutely have to have on those forms, and highlight those areas so your staff, or even if you're sending it to external customers, so they know what your expectation is. And then the research piece, once you get that job information, how are you verifying and validating the addresses and the ownership and all of those things? We used to spend a lot of time here. It can be pretty intensive, especially when you're given limited information. You end up spending a lot of time searching the internet, searching CAD, doing all those things. And when we moved over to the Handle portal, we virtually eliminated all of that extra work. So think about how much time you or your staff are spending searching and verifying information, because there are definitely better technologies like Handle that can do that for you now. And that was a huge benefit to us as far as time saving goes. So, and then I already kind of touched on this. So internal versus external, you just kind of want to look at what your customer base expects. Are they willing to provide that information up front? Is it a sensitive issue for your customers? Are you trying to provide better customer service? If so, it might make more sense for you to look at just completing those forms and getting that information to your staff in-house. So, guys, just again, feel free to ask questions if you have them.
We do have one question, Nicole. Do you
Sure.
have a template of the job sheet that you could share after the webinar's over?
Yes, I do. Absolutely. So, and that is one thing that we are working on right now. Handle does have a job sheet template built into the platform. And so we're just working on implementing that and changing a few things to accommodate our own specific needs. But that information will essentially funnel right into your project and your lien tracking in the Handle portal, which is pretty huge. So moving on, once you get the job information and get everything plugged into your system, what are you doing with that information at that point? How are you tracking it? A big thing for us here is, and what we used to do years ago, is enter the information into our ERP, and then we would take that information and then enter it into the lien tracking system that we had at the time. And that is just one thing that it drives me bonkers, is having to enter things multiple times in multiple spaces. There's just so much room for error when you're doing that. So think about that when you're thinking about, moving to a different system to track your lien rights. The other thing that we used to do is use some of our credit managers that are highly skilled in collecting your AR. We were using them to just enter data all day. And I have a hard time with that too, because, we're not getting the value out of our staff in doing that. So just keep that in mind. Where are you using your best talent? more often than not, they're probably better off used doing other things, aside from entering information into a system. And then, maybe full automation doesn't make sense for your company. Maybe there's, some things that, you're afraid of being automated, and that's fine too. But automate things where you can. It's a scary thing to move away from having your hands in everything and, manually checking things and plugging in dates and all of that, and then trusting a system to do that same thing. I lost sleep thinking about, kind of feeling like you're losing control of that, but would never go back to our old way of doing things. So
We have a question that came in.
perfect.
How can you validate from hiring a new person to do the job information versus automating when you're talking to your management?
So for us, I would have to say I would say we had more mistakes with the manual entry piece because you're in a hurry, most of the time you just kind of get in this, just recycle and repeat kind of thing. And you're relying on a person versus the information simply transferring from one system to another system. So as long as it's keyed in, correctly from the get-go, which there's room for error there too. That information for us now, it just simply moves over. So there's not room for that, if you're keying it in twice, kind of an error. And technology has advanced so much now that, especially for us using the handle system, there's so many checks and balances that catch mistakes, and I can kind of show you guys what that looks like here in a little bit, but it will catch on to things that, when we're validating addresses, like, hey, this address isn't not a, complete match. Is it possibly, is your project located here, kind of a thing? And so, yeah, there's just new things out there that prevent some of those mistakes that we suffered through in the past. So, and then, cost. I mean, I hate to say this because I know everybody's looking at, you don't want to let people go or lose staff because you're embracing technology, but that is the reality of the world we live in today, is adding certain technologies is a cost savings to your company. So,
Thank
yeah.
you.
Okay, and then the other big thing is, in ensuring that you're protected, is making sure that you're managing your deadlines and notice and lien deadlines. I would have to say on a daily basis for us, we do a ton of projects. So, every company again is going to be different here, but for us, it's daily, just to ensure that you're aware of what's coming up. Obviously, if you're inputting the data and you're going through the time and effort to set all that up, you don't want to miss a deadline just because you forgot to check in, for 2 weeks. So make sure that your team is aware of, and they understand, the state's statutes and what those deadlines look like, and give yourself padding. Just, make sure you're not setting your follow-ups, to the day before something needs to be filed. So it's extremely important. And so this is what we look at on a daily basis. This is just a snapshot of our handle screen, and this helps us stay on top of everything as a company and down to the individual credit manager level. So, and this is customizable. This we had customized to our own needs as far as when, we want to send our pre-lien notices out, when we want to file the liens, when we want to take action on our bonds. So Handle does have the data on the state statutes, but then you can take that data from there and set your reminders, so that you're taking action well before that deadline. So this is pretty self-explanatory. I would say it keeps your pre-liens separate from your other deadlines, and you can kind of just, click through and check each of those boxes on a daily basis, or however often makes sense for your company, maybe even weekly. I do pay attention to our past due deadlines here. Sometimes that's just simply because we're not keeping up on our checked boxes. And so, but it gives you, if you're overseeing a team of credit managers, it gives you visibility, which this is big for us because in the past we didn't have at a high level visibility on company-wide deadlines. Every credit manager tracked their own portfolio. And, if I wanted to go down into those portfolios to see, what they looked like and what kind of rights we were missing or had coming up, it was really hard to do. It required, a lot of digging. And so with this dashboard, it's just right here in front of me for all of my credit managers. So
we have a question on that.
Okay.
Are you able to pull a report on this to see who is doing what?
Yes, there is reporting capabilities for sure to drill down and see this. Yep. So this is live data. Our information is uploaded daily. So, every morning this is refreshed and it brings in a new set of data. So we didn't have that in the past either. We had to update it. It was basically updated once a week manually for us in the past. Okay, so just some things to consider too, when you're setting up projects, like deciding when to set up projects or track lien rights. These are just some things I like to throw out there that make sense for us and things that I've learned over the years that I might be helpful to share out to you guys, maybe not. But when we're setting up projects, we always look at, does it make sense at the end of the day to take the time to track the project, to send the pre-lien notification, to do all the things that securing a project involves, because at the end of the day, if we were in fact going to file the lien or file the bond claim, you have to look at the cost of that. If you're setting up a $1,500 project, but your lien's going to cost you $500, is it worth all that time spent on the front end? So I make sure my team is thinking through that before they set up all the projects and track all the projects, because it does, it's still a lot, to track. So just something important to consider. And another thing that I've learned, I didn't always do this, we would make a decision to set up a customer or not, but sometimes we make the decision to take on more risk and then think that we can maybe offset that risk by leaning everything, all the houses, or tracking all the houses and thinking that we have security that maybe we really don't. There's a lot of protections in various states in place for homeowners, the homestead exemption. And so we would just willy-nilly set up all the projects just to make ourselves feel better, so that we can say, well, if it goes bad, we can just file liens on 25 different projects. You have to think about that, from a moralistic perspective. So if you take on risk and that, is it fair to punish the homeowners that are using that particular customer for their project? So we've had some, big fails in this area where we set up a risky customer, tracked all their projects, and then at the end of the day, those were uncollectible liens, because of the homestead exemption. So just something to consider. So as you're setting those projects up. Okay. And then another thing that I've learned the hard way over the years is pay attention to your double jeopardy states versus the ones that, don't allow you to collect twice. There are states, obviously, that don't require preliminary notices, but you can send non-statutory notices to protect yourself. So if you're dealing, again, with a risky customer, it might make sense to send those non-statutory notices so that you can collect in the event that your customer gets paid in full on that project before you're able to execute on lien rights. So yeah, just be very aware of those states.
We do have a question on that.
Okay.
What is double jeopardy?
So double jeopardy is a state that will allow you to collect a second time from a property owner or a general contractor, as long as you take all the steps to protect yourself. Some states now don't allow that, like I said, unless you send a non-statutory notice. So you may think you're okay and not noticing because it's not a state requirement, but that non-statutory notice may mean, that it may be the difference between collecting and not collecting because you're dealing with somebody who is very aware of the laws in that state. So we've run into that where they hired an attorney. We thought maybe we could collect a second time from a general contractor, knowing our customer got paid in full, and they hired an attorney and fought us on it. So that's something for sure to consider when you're dealing with a higher risk customer.
We have a question that came in, which might be something you talk about later, but do you
Okay.
have wording on how to collect double from somebody?
We do, well, we typically, if it gets heated like that, we'll use an attorney to draft a letter for us. It's rare that we really have to argue too much. I mean, it's not something that anybody appreciates. We just let them know that based on, XYZ that we followed, we have the ability to collect twice, or we can take it further, and move to foreclosure if it gets to that. And they'll look into it on their end. But typically, if it's getting heated, that's where we do involve an attorney to help make sure that we're saying the right things and quoting the right statutes and things. So.
Thank you.
Okay. And then another thing, make sure you're aware of the type of work that you're selling to, residential, commercial. Are you considered a sub of a sub, a supplier, a GC? Those matter. Sometimes if you ask the right questions, you may find out that you're, too far down in the chain and you really don't have rights, even if you do take all the steps to send the right notices and protect yourself. We have that happen in this roofing industry all the time where the subcontractor actually subbed the work out to our customer. So it's, that's an important question to ask your sales rep, who should know where we fall in that chain on the project. And then one thing that we deal with all the time is the staff at the branches will key in tickets to a job account, which really can influence your ability to secure a job. If you're not paying attention to what tickets are going on that project, if they're putting stuff for another project on the one that you're trying to secure, that could extend your deadlines and that could, possibly screw up your timelines. So the nice thing about using Handle is they have a little flag that pops up for us that lets us know if there's an invoice with an address that varies from the original address that the project was set up with. So it's just kind of that extra reminder. Sometimes we're not, down in the weeds at the invoice level looking at that all the time. So having that little flag pop up and that notifies us that there's an address mismatch on an invoice is a big deal. So that can be make or break for sure. And then if you do find out that invoices were keyed somewhere else, maybe a shop account or another job account, mistakenly, they should have been put on the project that you're tracking or that you're wanting to execute rights on, you can just shift them around without having to do a bunch of credit rebilling in your ERP. You can just shift them around in the Handle portal, move them over to the correct project, which for us is a big deal. We see these mistakes probably, I would say, weekly. So intentional or not intentional. Okay, so obviously a big piece of this is executing on your promises. So if you're tracking, you're going through all the effort to make sure that you're setting up the jobs, sending the pre-liens, tracking everything, and it gets down to a deadline where you're having to make a decision, to lien or file a claim on the bond. make sure you actually do that. I've seen places where they threaten, say they're going to do this and then turn around and, they're too afraid to do it because of whatever repercussions. We all deal with special situations and have those special handling customers where it is a lot more sensitive, but in general, just make sure that you're following through so you're building good habits with your customer base and keeping that bar set high. It is hard to sometimes to follow through and to file on these because who's being impacted. But at the end of the day, if your customers know that you're serious when you make these threats, it's only going to benefit your total AR. And then in future projects, they're going to understand what your expectations of them are. So, and then make sure you, like I said early on, give yourself enough time to, number one, send the pre-liens out. Don't wait until your 19th day if you have a 20-day window. But also filing the liens. We've had, especially during COVID, we've had times where, we were in a 90-day lien state, we were at day 85 and thinking we had enough cushion there. And for whatever reason, the county couldn't get it recorded in 5 days. Like somebody was out sick and they just dropped the ball completely. So make sure, whatever that looks like for your company, make sure you're giving yourself that extra time to execute on those because you just never know. And then it also, if you give yourself and your customer that extra time, it's going to help your DSO at the end of the day because you're going to push for payment sooner than later. So another thing to think about is cost. If you're doing 11th hour lien filings, typically that's considered a rush notice, and it's going to cost you a lot more than it would if you followed a normal set of processes. So for us, we give ourselves about 14 to 20 days to execute on a lien, sometimes sooner. So depending on the risk of your customer. Let's see. And then one more thing here that I should have put under considerations actually is make sure you know how your branches are invoicing. Are they invoicing when the material ships, or do they invoice everything at the end of the month? That's something we've found out, is probably not best practice in some of our locations, is that they hang on to things, for extended periods of time. And our lien rights are dependent on that, unfortunately. So if they're not invoicing and so the information isn't popping into our system timely, it makes it really, really difficult for us to do our job and execute timely. So some questions and things to ask your branches that are doing the daily billing.
We have a question.
Okay.
So I say most of our customers wait till the day before or morning of. How are you able to give yourself 14 days?
So we set the expectation from the beginning. We'll give them, and because we have those reminders that pop up, so we'll go through like our 30-day upcoming deadline list, and we'll take that and reach out to customers to let them know a month out that, hey, we have, projects 1 through 4 with lien deadlines coming up here in the next 30 days. And that way they know what they need to work on so that they're not waiting until that, like I said, 89th day to make a payment. So that's just part of, when we're making our standard collection calls, we try to work those deadlines into those collection calls well before those deadlines are coming up. So
just a follow-up, do you have customers that you do wait till the last minute, or is that just rare?
I wish I could say no, they're all perfect. But the reality is yes. I mean, we try not to wait until 2 or 3 days before the deadline because we've been in situations where that's failed us. The truth of the matter is that is something that we do deal with on occasion. And in those cases, sometimes we will pay an attorney to file a rush claim for us and just kind of eat that cost. But it's definitely something that we try to encourage the credit managers to avoid if at all possible. And typically will involve upper management, if we get into a situation like that. So yeah. If only it were that easy, right? And everybody did what they were supposed to do on time. So so this is a screen. This is what we look at in the Handle portal, job specific lien tracking. So this is one project, just so you guys can kind of see what we're looking at. All of these little bubbles are auto-populated into the Handle system based on some coding that we set up when we input the projects into our ERP. There's really just a few pieces of information that our credit managers need to go and check. Specifically, that's already auto-populated, but this private versus public, sometimes they'll have to go double check that because I think you guys probably all know it's not always known at the beginning based on an address. I mean, sometimes a project has a different name that doesn't sound like a municipality, so we'll definitely double check that. But this is all automatic here. Our first furnishing and our last furnishing are just uploaded, or that date is set based on the invoices that are uploaded daily from our ERP. So Handle is able to just isolate that last shipping date or first shipping date for our pre-lien notices. This is something, though, that we have the option to change simply because sometimes we don't want to rely on a $200 will call as a last shipping, invoice, especially on a larger project. So that can be disputed. You want to rely on a larger ticket that's shipped to the property's address, just to be 100% safe. Again, we run into situations where that, doesn't always work out the way we want it to, but this gives us the option to update the date so that we're excluding, small will calls from that tracking. And we do have an automatic, this is customizable too, so Handle does automatically remove any ticket that's $1,000 or less from this tracking, but that's fully customizable to your business needs. And so Lori mentioned, that Handle does verify project information for you. And so that's just simply done by clicking this request buttons for a full touch verification. So if you're a little nervous that, maybe we didn't get the right address or the right ownership on the job sheet, which happens more often than not, then Handle staff can go and research that address for you and verify the ownership. They do the research even around the property if it's an invalid address to see if they might have located your actual project. So we found that super helpful. We use that feature all the time. And I blacked all this out, but normally, up here at the top, you're going to see your project address, your customer ID, the job ID, what branch it shipped from. Again, this is all customizable. The general contractor that you plugged into your system, your credit manager assignments and all of that. And then as far as executing on pre-liens and liens, you just, click one of these options down here. So you can snooze it, again, customizable. Or if you have a project, that you've chosen to waive rights on, you can ignore it. You can plug notes in. You can look at, drill down and look at all of the invoice detail if you want. And then from this same screen, this is where you can also attach lien waivers if you're doing any sort of lien waivers on that particular project.
We have a question.
Okay.
What is the top red left button, or what is that?
Okay, so this is a project where we actually are not going to we didn't end up sending a preliminary notice on, but this is telling us that today, when I screenshot this 29th, that was our last day to send the preliminary notice. And again, this is not something that I would normally recommend doing because more than likely that notice is not going to get mailed out on time. But that's just giving you your deadline. And normally that's going to have, 10 days left to act or, whatever, 20 days left to act. So it's just kind of a countdown, letting your final day when you have to get that notice sent out. So, okay. And this is just another example of that. This particular one has, it has the notice that we sent out stored up here, and it gives you your tracking. So it shows you that, the notice of right to claim lien is sent. It's on its way. It tells you, who's received it, and how, email, mail, etc. So it gives you all that information there. And it tells you, if you have other documents stored under the project. So that's the nice thing too, is having all your information in one place. I know for us, we had waivers everywhere. The credit managers had some. We had some in job folders. We had admins sending waivers. Now it's all here attached to the project. So if you need somebody to back you up, while you're on vacation, they just go into the project and they see everything that's already been completed, which is nice. Okay, and then lastly, the benefits of making sure that you stay on top of this security are obviously, faster payments because you're leveraging those rights to get your customers to pay faster. And then sometimes you're helping your customers do their job, and get their AR collected on time. Not all of our customers understand, the ins and outs of lien rights and the state statutes and things. And so we often find ourselves not giving legal advice. We let them know that's, not our role, but just kind of helping them, walking them through and helping them understand what rights they have. And then, us enforcing rights on their project helps them collect at least the material portion of that job, which is a huge benefit. So, and then, when you do send out pre-lien notices, we have found out that we end up, we get placed at the top of the food chain when they're issuing checks for their draws and payouts. So I feel like, if they have your notice on their desk, they're going to do everything in their power to make sure that you're paid so that you can't, execute at the end of the day on a lien. So
we have a question that came in on that.
Sure. Okay.
Do you send notices or pre-lien notices out on every job, or do you have a dollar amount that's your cutoff?
We do have a dollar amount, and it's really customer specific. And it depends highly on the risk of the customer, and the credit limit that we've extended them. So if they don't have the credit limit to support a sizable job, or they've requested that we not secure rights on a job, and all of those things factor into when we're going to protect ourselves and not protect ourselves. So I would like to say it's, our limit is, X dollars, but it varies so much across the board depending on the situation and customer, for sure. And type of work, residential versus commercial. We're a lot more careful on residential than we are commercial because so many states protect homeowners from liens. So, and then the other thing too, in making sure that you're secured is just keeping that percentage of unsecured balances low. If your company, borrows from a bank for their lines of credit, to purchase materials and things, operating lines, they're going to look at that more favorably than they would just, a completely unsecured AR portfolio. So that's something that you want to consider, especially when you're being audited, your annual audit, they're looking at things like that. So, so it's important, something that you may want to look at. And then, if your customer ends up filing bankruptcy, having that security on a job is going to give you an advantage. You may not lose the entire balance. because you have the ability to go collect on a particular project and it wouldn't be considered a preference payment claim. And I just touched on that. So banks viewing collateralized AR is more favorably. So we just one example of this, we just had a situation with a customer that's going under, hasn't officially filed bankruptcy or anything yet, but we were having a heck of a time getting the customer to communicate, respond to any payment demands. So we ended up executing on a nice high six-figure lien, and which got the property owner involved. Luckily, the property owner had been holding funds on that project because they knew something just didn't smell right. So that gave them our contact information, and they started communicating with us directly on what's going on. They did some research, consulted with an attorney, and we ended up just collecting on that particular project when, had we not done that, we probably would have lost that high six-figure balance because they're just, the company is sinking. So way over their head in debt.
Those are good stories to hear.
Yeah. Yeah.